Sometimes the most dangerous prisons are the ones we build ourselves. From Hope. Welcome back to another real story from the streets of Thailand. This one comes from Ethan, a 52-year-old from New Jersey who thought he found paradise in Bangkok. But paradise, as you'll see, can quickly turn into purgatory when money meets desperation. If you like stories like this, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Your support keeps these real stories coming. My name is Ethan, and I need to tell you something that's been eating me alive for months. Picture this: divorced accountant from Newark, 3 kids who barely call, and a job that feels like watching paint dry in slow motion. That was my life at 52. Wake up, spreadsheets, sleep, repeat. The American dream had turned into the American nightmare. Then my buddy Rick, you know the type, always bragging about his adventures, kept telling me about Bangkok. Ethan, brother, you gotta see this place. It's like nothing exists back home. For 2 years he planted these seeds. Every poker night, another story. Every barbecue, another adventure. The way he described it, Bangkok wasn't just a city, it was a whole different universe, where guys like me could feel alive again. But I had responsibilities. My ex-wife Sarah still needed alimony. My kids needed college funds. I was trapped in a cage of my own making, watching younger guys at work get promoted while I counted other people's money. That's when the company offered early retirement packages. The moment I saw that number, enough to start over somewhere new, something clicked. Rick's stories weren't just stories anymore. They were calling me. I told myself it was just a vacation. 2 weeks to find myself, or whatever middle-aged men are supposed to do. I booked the flight to Bangkok before I could change my mind. The moment I stepped off that plane at Suvarnabhumi Airport, I knew my old life was over. The heat hit me first, this thick, warm blanket that felt like being wrapped in possibility. Newark's cold November seemed like a distant memory. Even the chaos felt different here, alive. I took a taxi to Sukhumvit Road where Rick had recommended I stay. The hotel was nothing fancy but clean enough. More importantly, it was right in the heart of everything Rick had described. That first night I was terrified. What was I doing? A divorced accountant from New Jersey wandering around Bangkok alone? I almost called it quits and booked an early flight home. But then I walked outside. The streets were buzzing with energy I hadn't felt since, honestly, maybe never. The lights, the sounds, the smells of street food mixing with night jasmine, everything was different here. Everything was possible. I found a quiet bar on Soy 11. Nothing too crazy for my first night, just wanted to ease into things. The bartender, a friendly guy named Sam, started chatting with me. Turns out he spoke perfect English and had worked in Australia for a few years. First time in Bangkok, he asked. Yeah, just exploring. He smiled knowingly. Bangkok has a way of showing you who you really are. Just be careful you don't lose yourself in the process. I thought it was just bartender wisdom. How wrong I was. In Bangkok, loneliness becomes a luxury you can't afford because someone's always watching, waiting to fill that void. After a week of temple visits and tourist stuff, I was getting restless. This wasn't what Rick had described. I felt like I was missing something huge. That's when I downloaded the dating apps. Back home, these apps were brutal for guys like me. But in Bangkok? Different story entirely. My profile got more matches in one day than I'd gotten in 6 months back in New Jersey. Most conversations fizzled out, but then I matched with someone named Lena. Her photos took my breath away. 28 years old, working as a marketing coordinator, and stunning in a way that made me question what she was doing talking to a guy like me. But her messages were different from the others. Thoughtful, curious about my life back home. Funny in ways that translated perfectly through text. We chatted for hours that first night. She told me about growing up in Chiang Rai, moving to Bangkok for university, and how lonely the big city could be. I told her about my divorce, my kids, my boring life in Newark. You seem like a man with a kind heart, she typed. Those are rare here. Those words hit me like lightning. When was the last time someone had called me kind? We agreed to meet for coffee the next day at a cafe in Phnom Penh. I was nervous as hell. What if she took one look at me and walked away? What if her photos were old? What if this was all some elaborate scam? But when she walked into that cafe, she was even more beautiful in person. And the way she smiled when she saw me, like she was genuinely happy to be there, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. The most expensive mistakes always start with the cheapest feelings. Our first date lasted 8 hours. We walked through Lumpini Park, shared street food from vendors she knew, and talked about everything. My failed marriage, her dreams of starting her own business, movies we loved, places we wanted to travel. She was intelligent, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in my stories about life in America. When I told her about my kids, she asked to see photos. When I mentioned my love for old jazz music, she said she'd always wanted to learn more about it. "You're not like the other foreign men I've met," she said as we sat by the lake watching the sunset. "You actually listen." That night she came back to my hotel, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like someone actually wanted to be with me. Not because they had to, not out of obligation, but because they chose to. The next 2 weeks became a blur of perfect days and passionate nights. She showed me her Bangkok hidden restaurants in Chinatown, rooftop bars with incredible views, weekend markets where she knew all the best vendors. I was falling hard, and I didn't care how crazy it seemed. When my vacation was supposed to end, I couldn't bring myself to leave. I extended my stay another week, then another. Lena seemed as reluctant to see me go as I was to leave. "What if I stayed longer?" I asked one night as we lay in bed. She turned to look at me, her eyes reflecting the city lights streaming through the window. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. I could get a longer visa, maybe even look into retiring here permanently." Her smile could have powered half of Bangkok. "That would make me very happy, Ethan. Very happy." That's when I made the decision that would change everything. Love makes accountants forget how to count. I called my lawyer back in Newark and started the process of making my early retirement permanent. I'd have enough money to live comfortably in Bangkok for years, especially with Lena showing me how to live like a local rather than a tourist. She'd been having some financial difficulties, her marketing job didn't pay much, and she was trying to help her family back in Chiang Rai. When she mentioned struggling to make rent on her small apartment, I offered to help. "I can't accept money from you," she said, but I could see the relief in her eyes. "It's not charity. We're building something together, right? Partners help each other." I started with small amounts, 10,000 baht here, 15,000 there. It felt good to be needed, to be able to solve her problems so easily. Back home, my money had never felt this powerful, this meaningful. Then her mother got sick. Lena was devastated, crying in my arms as she told me about the hospital bills they couldn't afford, the treatments her mother needed. I'd never seen her so vulnerable, so scared. "How much?" I asked. "Too much, maybe 200,000 baht. I'll figure something out, maybe borrow from friends. I'll cover it." She looked at me like I'd just offered to move mountains. "Ethan, no. That's too much. I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering. I love you, Lena. This is what people do for the people they love." The gratitude in her eyes, the way she held me that night, it felt like the most meaningful thing I'd ever done with my money. But that was just the beginning. The biggest red flags often look like green lights when you're driving with your heart. Over the next 2 months, Lena's financial emergencies became more frequent. Her grandmother needed medication, her brother's motorcycle was stolen, and he needed a new one for work. The marketing company she worked for was having cash flow problems and delays in paying salaries. Each time, I helped. Each time, she was grateful in ways that made me feel like a hero instead of a fool. I was living in a nice serviced apartment now, with a 1-year lease. Lena stayed over most nights, and we'd fallen into this comfortable routine that felt more real than my marriage ever had. She'd cook breakfast while I checked emails from my financial advisor back home. We'd explore different neighborhoods on weekends, talking about maybe opening a small business together. She wanted to start an export company, selling Thai handicrafts to American boutiques. It sounded perfect, combining her local knowledge with my business connections back home. We spent hours planning it, researching suppliers, creating business plans on my laptop. "We could be partners in everything," she said one evening as we worked on our projections. "Business partners, life partners, maybe more." The way she said more made my heart race. We'd never talked about marriage directly, but the hints were getting stronger. She'd point out jewelry in shop windows, ask questions about weddings in America, wonder aloud what it would be like to visit New Jersey in the spring. I was already mentally picking out engagement rings when she told me about the business opportunity that needed immediate action. There's a supplier in Chiang Mai who has these beautiful silk scarves, but he needs cash up front. If we can invest 300,000 baht now, we could get our first shipment at 40% below market price. It would be the foundation of our business. 300,000 baht, about $8,500, 0 cents. A significant amount, but not crazy for a business investment. And the way she presented it, with spreadsheets, photos of the products, contact information for the supplier, it felt legitimate. "Let me think about it," I said. That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and tried to quiet the small voice in my head that was starting to whisper warnings. But the voice was drowned out by something much louder, the sound of possibility, of a future where I mattered to someone who mattered to me. I transferred the money the next morning. Sometimes the universe conspires to show you exactly who you're dealing with and exactly who you've become. For 3 weeks after the business investment, everything seemed perfect. Lena showed me photos of the silk scarves, gave me updates on shipment preparations, and talked excitedly about our first orders from American boutiques she claimed to have contacted. But then, the cracks started showing. It started small. She began taking phone calls in Thai, stepping out onto the balcony where I couldn't hear clearly. When I asked who called, she'd give vague answers, just family stuff or work problems. Then she started being unavailable during certain hours. "Meeting with suppliers," she'd say, or "helping my friend with her wedding planning." Always something that sounded reasonable but fell off. The biggest red flag came when I suggested visiting her family in Chiang Rai. "Not yet," she said quickly. "My mother is still recovering and the house is too small for guests. Maybe in a few months." In 6 months of being together, I'd never met her family. I'd never even seen her apartment. She'd always said it was too messy or she was embarrassed by how small it was. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. But love makes you blind to everything except what you want to see. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was waiting for her at our usual restaurant in Thonglor when I saw her across the street. She was with an older foreign man, German or Scandinavian by the look of him, and they were being very friendly, intimate even. My blood went cold. I watched as she laughed at something he said, touching his arm the same way she touched mine. They walked into a hotel together. I sat in that restaurant for 2 hours, my food getting cold, my mind racing. There had to be an explanation. Maybe he was a business contact. Maybe he was helping with the export company somehow. But deep down, I knew I'd always known. Truth is like sunrise. It's coming whether you're ready for it or not. I didn't sleep that night. By the time Lena showed up at my apartment the next evening, I'd replayed every conversation, every moment, every time something had felt off. But I'd chosen to ignore it. She walked in with her usual bright smile, carrying takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. "Sorry I'm late, baby. Crazy day with the suppliers. But I have good news about our first shipment." I watched her move around my kitchen, setting out food, chattering about her day. She was so natural, so convincing. If I hadn't seen her with that other man myself, I might have actually believed her. "How was your meeting yesterday?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Meeting? Oh, you mean with the fabric supplier. Good, good. Very productive. Where did you meet?" A tiny pause. "At his office in Siloam." I nodded. "Must have been a long meeting. I tried calling you around 7 p.m. Oh, you know how these business dinners go. Very important to build relationships here. Every word was perfectly reasonable. Every explanation could have been true. But I knew what I'd seen. "Lena," I said quietly, "we need to talk." Something in my tone made her freeze. The cheerful mask slipped for just a second, and I saw something else underneath. Calculation, maybe even fear. "Of course, baby. What's wrong? I saw you yesterday." "With another man?" "Going into the Marriott on Sukhumvit." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I watched her face cycle through emotions, surprise, confusion, hurt, And finally, resignation. Even, she started, just tell me the truth. Please. I think I deserve that much. She sat down across from me, her beautiful face suddenly looking older, more tired. He's a client, she said finally, for my other work. What other work? Another long pause. The kind of work that pays my real bills. And there it was. The truth I'd been hiding from for months. The most expensive education you can get is the one that teaches you about yourself. How long? I asked. How long what? How long have you been working? She looked down at her hands. 5 years, since I was 23. The marketing job? Real but part-time, doesn't pay enough to live on. Your sick mother? Also real. The medicine is expensive. The business opportunity, the silk scarves. Now she looked up at me, and I saw something like genuine sadness in her eyes. That part, that was real too. I really thought we could do it together. I wanted to stop the other work, Ethan. You made me want to try something different. I felt like I was drowning in the middle of a conversation. Everything was true and false at the same time. The other clients, I said. How many? Right now 3 regulars, including you. Sometimes others. 3? I was one of 3 men financing her life, thinking I was special. Thinking I was loved. The money I gave you for your mother's treatment? Went to my mother's treatment. The $300,000 for the business. She was quiet for a long time. Some of it went to the business. Some I needed to pay off debts, to keep the other clients happy, until I could figure out how to transition to the legitimate business. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. So you were using my money to subsidize your time with other men? Ethan, it's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I stood up, pacing to the window. The Bangkok skyline twinkled below us, beautiful and indifferent. I thought you loved me. I do love you, she said quietly, in my way. You're different from the others, kinder, more genuine, but not different enough to be exclusive with. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. What happens now? I asked. That depends on you, she said. I could stop seeing the others, focus just on you and the business, but I'd need more support to make that work financially. Even now, in the middle of the truth, she was negotiating. I had to admire the professionalism, even as it broke my heart. How much more? Maybe 50,000 baht a month, plus the business investments we already planned. 50,000 baht a month, $1,400, 0 cents, for exclusivity with a woman who'd been professionally lying to me for months. It was insane. It was also tempting. Rock bottom has a basement, and the elevator only goes down. That night, after Lena left, I sat on my balcony, drinking whiskey and doing math. I could afford her terms. Barely, but I could do it. 50,000 baht a month plus business investments would eat through my retirement savings faster than planned, but it wasn't impossible. The question wasn't whether I could afford it financially. The question was whether I could afford it emotionally. I'd come to Bangkok looking for something my divorce had taken away. The feeling of being wanted, needed, important to someone. Lena had given me that feeling, even if it was manufactured. Could a purchased love still be meaningful if it felt real? I thought about going home to Newark, back to the cold, back to the loneliness, back to being invisible. My kids would visit for obligatory holidays. I'd date women my own age, who'd compare me to their ex-husbands. I'd grow old watching other people live their lives. Or I could stay here, in the warm chaos of Bangkok, with a beautiful woman who made me feel alive, even if I was paying for the privilege. Was that really so different from my marriage, where I'd paid for everything while my ex-wife grew more distant each year? At least this transaction was honest. I called Lena the next morning. I'll give you 40,000 a month, I said, and I want complete transparency about the business investments. Real receipts, real progress reports. And the others? Gone. Just me. Ethan, you're sure about this? I don't want you to regret. I'm sure. But I wasn't sure. I was desperate. There's a difference, though it can be hard to see when you're drowning. Some prisons have golden bars and a view of paradise. For 4 months, the arrangement worked. Sort of. Lena moved some of her things into my apartment, though she kept her own place for independence. She was attentive, affectionate, and present in ways that felt almost like a real relationship. We continued working on the business plan, and she showed me real progress, contact lists, even a small website she'd built. But something fundamental had changed. Every kiss felt calculated. Every I love you sounded rehearsed. The spontaneity that had made our early days so magical was gone, replaced by a performance I was paying to watch. The worst part wasn't the money, though watching my savings decrease each month was painful. The worst part was the constant wondering. When she laughed at my jokes, was it real? When she cuddled against me while watching movies, was she genuinely comfortable or just earning her fee? When she talked about our future, did any part of her believe it? I became obsessed with trying to detect authenticity. I'd analyze her facial expressions, test her with questions about things we'd discussed before, look for cracks in the performance. It was exhausting. And then there were the other signs that something wasn't right. She still disappeared for hours with vague explanations. Her phone was always face down, always locked. When I suggested we travel together to visit friends of mine in Hong Kong, she found excuses to avoid it. The breaking point came when I got food poisoning and spent 3 days bedridden in my apartment. Lena brought me soup and medicine, playing the caring girlfriend perfectly. But on the second day I woke up from a fever nap to find her on the balcony having an intense phone conversation in Thai. I don't speak much Thai, but I'd picked up enough to understand basic words. I heard Farang, numbers that sounded like amounts of money, and something that sounded like scheduling. When she came back inside, I pretended to be asleep. But my mind was racing. She was still seeing other clients. Had to be. The conversation was too businesslike, too secretive for anything else. That night, after she left to check on her apartment, I made a decision that would finally give me the truth I'd been too scared to face. Sometimes you have to become someone you don't like to learn something you need to know. I hired a private investigator. His name was David, a British expat who'd been in Bangkok for 15 years and specialized in what he diplomatically called relationship verification services. Apparently, I wasn't his first client with this particular problem. "Look, mate," he said over coffee in a quiet cafe in Ekamai, "I'm going to tell you what I tell everyone. If you're hiring me, you already know what I'm going to find. The question is whether you really want proof." "I want proof." "Fair enough. Give me a week." That week was the longest of my life. I continued the charade with Lena, pretending everything was normal while my mind churned with possibilities. Part of me hoped David would find nothing, that my suspicions were just paranoia brought on by the artificial nature of our arrangement. The other part of me, the part that had been growing stronger each day, hoped he'd find everything, so I could finally stop living in this expensive limb. David called me on a Thursday morning. "We need to meet. And Ethan, bring tissues." Reality has a way of making itself known, usually when you're least prepared for it. David's report was thorough, professional, and devastating. Photos of Lena with 4 different foreign men over the course of a week. Timestamps showing she was with someone else during hours she'd told me she was working late or visiting family. Screenshots of her profiles on multiple dating apps, some under different names. But the worst part was the audio recording from a conversation she'd had with a friend at a coffee shop in Siam Paragon. David had hired a Thai woman to sit nearby with a directional microphone. "The American is getting suspicious," Lena had said in Thai, "but he's still paying, so I need to be more careful about scheduling the others." "How much is he giving you monthly?" her friend asked. "40,000 for exclusivity? Plus, he covers my rent and gives me money for business investments." "It's good money, but boring. He wants to talk about feelings all the time." They'd laughed about it, about me wanting to talk about feelings. "What about the others?" "The German is higher maintenance but pays more per session. The Australian is cheap but easy to please. The Korean businessman just wants someone to have dinner with when he's in town. They're all harmless enough." "And the American doesn't know?" "He suspects, but he doesn't want to know for sure. He's lonely, not stupid. As long as I'm careful about scheduling and keep telling him he's special, he'll keep paying." David paused the recording. "There's more, but I think you get the idea. I stared at the photos spread across the table. In every one, Lena looked happy, engaged, exactly the way she looked with me. She was a professional, and she was very good at her job. How much do I owe you? I asked. David pushed the photos toward me. 3,000 baht. But Ethan, whatever you're thinking of doing next, sleep on it first. Make decisions when you're angry, and you'll regret them for years. The second time you confront someone who's been lying to you, you both know how it's going to end. I waited until Friday evening, when Lena came over for our usual dinner and movie night. She was in a good mood, chattering about progress on the export business, and asking if I wanted to go to the weekend market in Chatuchak on Saturday. I let her talk while I poured wine and ordered food. I wanted to study her one last time. The animated gestures, the bright smile, the way she touched my arm when making a point. It was a masterful performance, and I found myself genuinely admiring the skill, even as it destroyed me. Either you're quiet tonight, she said during dinner. Everything okay? I have something to show you. I pulled out my laptop and opened the folder David had given me. Started with the photos, Lena with the German man outside a restaurant in Selam, Lena holding hands with the Australian while walking through Lumpvidi Park, Lena kissing the Korean businessman goodnight outside his hotel in Sathorn. She went very still, her fork halfway to her mouth. When were these taken? She asked quietly. Last week, while you were supposedly working late or visiting your sick aunt? She set down her fork and looked at me directly. The mask was completely gone now. What I saw underneath wasn't the evil manipulator I'd expected. It was exhaustion, resignation, maybe even relief. I suppose you want to hear me apologize, she said. Do you want to apologize? She considered this for a long moment. Not really. I never lied about what I was. You chose not to ask the right questions. It was a fair point, and somehow that made it hurt worse. The business. Was any of that real? The products are real. I really was trying to build something legitimate, but I needed the other income to survive while we built it up. You could have told me the truth. And you would have been fine with it, really? I thought about it, honestly. No, probably not. Then what would have been the point of telling you? We sat in silence for a while, the Bangkok traffic humming outside my window. Two people who'd created something beautiful and false together, now watching it dissolve into something honest and ugly. What happens now? I asked, echoing our previous conversation. That's up to you, she said. I can keep seeing the others and lower your monthly payment, or you can end this and I'll understand. Or what? Or you can accept what this really is and stop torturing yourself trying to make it something else. Some of my clients have been with me for years. They're happy because they know exactly what they're buying. It was a business proposal delivered with the same calm professionalism she'd used to discuss silk scarves and export licenses. And what exactly would I be buying? Companionship, affection, sexual intimacy. Someone who genuinely likes spending time with you, even if you're not the only one. I do like you, Ethan. That part was never fake. I looked at this beautiful woman sitting across from me, offering to commoditize the thing I'd thought was love. The sad part was, it was probably the most honest conversation we'd ever had. I need time to think. She nodded and stood up. I'll go stay at my apartment tonight. Call me when you decide. After she left, I sat on my balcony and tried to figure out who I'd become. A year ago, I was a boring accountant from Newark, married to routine and resigned to invisibility. Now I was a middle-aged man in Bangkok, seriously considering paying for a relationship with a woman who was professionally caring about me. The question wasn't whether this was pathetic. It obviously was. The question was whether it was pathetic enough to walk away from. Markets exist for everything, including the things we're afraid to admit we need. I didn't call Lena for 3 days. Instead, I did what accountants do when faced with complicated decisions. I made spreadsheets. Column A, cost of staying in Bangkok and continuing some version of the arrangement with Lena. Column B, cost of returning to Newark and trying to rebuild a normal life. The numbers were surprisingly close. Bangkok rent plus Lena's monthly fee plus living expenses came to about the same as Newark rent plus alimony, plus the cost of dating, assuming I could find someone to date. But the intangible columns were where things got interesting. Column A offered guaranteed companionship, physical intimacy, and the continued fantasy of mattering to someone beautiful. The weather was better, the cost of living lower, and nobody back home would judge my choices because nobody back home would know about them. Column B offered authenticity, self-respect, and the possibility of finding genuine love with someone age-appropriate. It also offered loneliness, judgment from people who'd never understand why I'd thrown my life away in Asia, and the high probability of spending my remaining years alone. Both options were compromises. The question was which compromise I could live with. On the fourth day, I called Lena. "I want to continue," I said, "but with new terms." "I'm listening." 30,000 baht a month. No more business investments until I see real revenue from the export company, and I want to meet the others. Meet them? If we're going to do this, I want it demystified. I want to understand exactly what I'm part of. There was a long pause. "That's unusual, but possible." "Possibly. Can I ask why?" It was a good question. "Because I'm tired of pretending this is something it's not. If I'm buying a service, I want to understand the full scope of what I'm buying." Another pause. "You're different from most clients, Ethan. Is that good or bad?" "I'm not sure yet. Nothing kills fantasy quite like reality, but sometimes that's exactly what you need." Lena arranged for me to meet Hans, the German businessman, at a neutral location, a coffee shop in the Emporium shopping center. He was in his early 60s, well-dressed and surprisingly normal-looking. "So, you're the American," he said in accented English as we shook hands. "Lena speaks of you often. Well, good things, I hope." He laughed. "She says you're very serious about everything. Too much thinking, not enough enjoying." We sat down with our coffee while Lena excused herself to make a phone call, leaving us alone to have what might have been the strangest conversation of my life. "How long have you been seeing her?" I asked. 2 years, maybe a bit more. I come to Bangkok every month for business, stay for a week. She's part of my routine here, and you're comfortable with the arrangement?" Hans looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Why wouldn't I be? I pay for a service, she provides it excellently. We both get what we need." "But doesn't it feel artificial?" "Of course it's artificial. So is the service I get from my hotel, my driver, my translator. The artificiality doesn't make it less valuable." He had a point that I found disturbing in its logic. "Don't you want something real?" I asked. "I have something real," Hans said. "I have a wife of 35 years in Hamburg who I love very much, but she has no interest in travel or sex, and I have no interest in changing that arrangement. This fills a gap in a way that hurts no one." "Your wife knows?" "Of course not. But she also doesn't ask what I do on business trips, and I don't volunteer information." We're both comfortable with that. When Lena returned, she seemed nervous about how our conversation had gone. Hans, on the other hand, seemed amused by the whole situation. "Your American is very philosophical," he told her. "Be patient with him. He'll figure it out eventually." After Hans left, Lena and I walked through the shopping center in awkward silence. "Well?" she finally asked. "He seems nice." "He is nice. They're all nice in their different ways. That's why I keep seeing them. And me? How am I different?" She stopped walking and looked at me seriously. "You want it to be love, Ethan. The others want it to be business. Your way is more complicated." "More complicated for who?" "For both of us." Some truths are easier to swallow when they come with an accent and a sense of humor. Greg from Melbourne was the opposite of Hans, younger, more casual, and brutally honest about why he was in Bangkok. "Mate, I got divorced 3 years ago," he told me over beers at a rooftop bar in Asok. "Lost half my money, my house, and my confidence with women. Came here for a holiday and realized I could have a better life as a single man in Bangkok than a bitter divorcee in Melbourne." "So you moved here permanently? Work remotely in IT consulting?" make Australian money, live on Thai expenses, and have companionship without the drama of traditional dating. It's a win-win, mate. And you're okay knowing Lena sees other guys? Greg shrugged, taking a swig of his beer. Mate, she's a beautiful woman. If she only saw me, I'd be suspicious. Besides, it keeps things uncomplicated. No drama, no expectations, just good times. She's a professional, and I respect that. Best investment I've ever made in my happiness, honestly. His words, blunt and undeniably practical, resonated with a part of me I hadn't acknowledged. He wasn't looking for love or a fairy tale. He was looking for a service, and he was getting exactly what he paid for, no illusions. It was crude but honest. Lena joined us, smiling warmly at both of us. Greg gave her a casual pat on the arm, and they chatted for a moment in Thai before he turned back to me. Well, Ethan, hope this helped clear things up for you. Lena's a good sort. Just remember, this isn't New Jersey. What you see is what you get, and sometimes that's enough. I looked at Lena, then at Greg, and a strange sense of clarity washed over me. They were both right. My American expectations of romance and exclusivity were simply not the currency being traded here. Sometimes, the truth isn't about what you find, but what you choose to see. After meeting Hans and Greg, the idea of meeting the Korean businessman Mr. Kim felt almost mundane. He was quiet, polite, and clearly saw Lena as a pleasant companion for his infrequent business trips. He spoke little English, and our interaction was brief, punctuated by Lena's easy translations. Each meeting chipped away at the romantic fantasy I had built around Lena, replacing it with a stark, transactional reality. It was painful, like peeling off a bandage to reveal a wound, but also strangely liberating. The constant wondering, the agonizing over her true feelings, it all dissipated. She was a professional, and I was a client. Simple as that. The choice was no longer about true love versus betrayal. It was about what I truly wanted for my life in Bangkok. Did I want to return to the cold isolation of New Jersey, or could I find a different kind of contentment here? I realized that what Lena offered, companionship, affection, sexual intimacy, and a feeling of being valued, was exactly what I had been missing in Newark. The fact that it was a paid service didn't negate the feelings it evoked in me. Perhaps those feelings, however artificial others might perceive them, were still real to me. One evening, as Lena cooked dinner in my apartment, I watched her move with an ease that suggested genuine comfort. She was humming a Thai song, occasionally glancing over at me with a soft smile. "Lena," I said, "I think I understand now." She paused, turning from the stove. "Understand what, Ethan?" "Everything. This life, how it works, what our arrangement really is." She nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "And what is it?" "It's a transaction, but a valuable one, for both of us. You get financial security and I get what I need. And maybe," I added, meeting her gaze, "maybe some of that liking you mentioned isn't entirely fake either." A small, genuine smile touched her lips. "No, Ethan, that part was never fake. Paradise isn't a place, it's a perspective." Life with Lena settled into a new normal. Our monthly agreement was clear. 30,000 baht for consistent companionship. No more surprise business investments unless they genuinely proved profitable. She still had her other clients, but she was more transparent about her schedule, telling me when she had appointments, rather than fabricating elaborate stories. I no longer asked about the details, nor did I demand exclusivity. The truth, once faced, was far less painful than the endless suspicion. We continued working on the export business, but with a more pragmatic approach. She found a legitimate Thai partner who handled the local production and shipping, and I focused on market research and potential buyers in the U.S. It was slow going, but it was real progress, built on a foundation of actual business, not just my blind hope. My initial anger and hurt faded, replaced by a strange sense of peace. I was no longer living a lie, even if the truth was unconventional. I had companionship, laughter, and physical affection. I had someone to share meals with, explore the city with, and simply be present with. Bangkok remained the vibrant, chaotic city that had first captured my imagination, I continued to explore, no longer driven by a desperate search for paradise, but by a genuine curiosity about the culture. I met other expats, joined a local walking group, and even started taking basic Thai lessons. My life here was rich in ways it never had been back home. I thought about Newark sometimes, about my kids who still rarely called, about the life I'd left behind. There were moments of melancholy, moments where I wondered if I'd made the right choices. But then Lena would walk in, smiling, her presence a warm, familiar comfort, and I would realize that I was exactly where I needed to be. The Bangkok betrayal hadn't been about Lena. It had been about my own illusions, my own desperate hope for a fairy tale ending that didn't exist. The real betrayal was my unwillingness to see the truth. Once I accepted that, the prison I'd built for myself from hope finally unlocked. I was still Ethan, the accountant from New Jersey, but now I was also a man who had faced a painful truth and found a different kind of contentment in its wake. In Bangkok, the most dangerous prisons were the ones we built ourselves. But sometimes, by accepting the reality of the bars, you could finally see the freedom beyond them. And that's Ethan's story. A stark reminder that what we seek and what we find can often be two very different things. But sometimes, in facing the uncomfortable truths, we find a different kind of peace. What do you think of Ethan's choice? Was he a fool, or did he find his own version of happiness? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories from the streets of Thailand. Your support keeps these narratives alive. Until next time, stay safe and stay real.